title of today's message is What Everything Says. And if you noted, if it was written correctly in your bulletin, and it is, there's a space between the words every and thing. Now, I want to take a quick informal survey, nothing too embarrassing, but if you lift your hands just for a moment, how many of you know what this game is that's on the screen? Oh, good. I am so encouraged. There are moments that I need to check and make sure I'm not too old, okay? But kids, hopefully some of you are also raising your hands. This game, of course, is very famous, this game of Monopoly. And I used to play this as a kid growing up. When I started out, it was such a big deal when this game first came out and we started playing it at home. Because there's all of this money, right? And as little kids, our eyes would grow really big. It's like, and I remember when I first started playing, I would spread out all the money and show how rich I was. But then as I got smarter, I realized, maybe it's better to hide how much money I have. Well, today's message is all about this topic, very, very central to Monopoly. And it's more than just the money. It's about the material possessions of life. So yes, it's about money. That's kind of the central topic of today's passage. But it goes much more and further than just that. In fact, our main point that I want us to get to today, that we're going to build towards and work towards, is this. Money was made to show the gospel, God's love, and point to Him. So give generously. You might say, well, gee, Pastor Eric, I'm not sure that's in the passage, but we're going to work through it, and I think you'll see where this point comes from. So, we'll work from there. Our passage begins, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will also be. We're going to cover three main sections, but in that middle section, there's going to be a little bit longer sort of a detour in the middle, and we're going to fill in. But the first whole section is essentially about stuff. Stuff. I'm in the process of trying to get started with packing. And every time we move, I come to the conclusion, I have way too much stuff. And as time goes by, what do we realize? I don't know. Where did this all come from? And little by little, we get our stuff. Well, I want to ask this question. What does our stuff say? And when it comes moving time, you know what it's saying? It's saying, you're a pack rat. You have too many things. You don't need all these things. That's what my stuff keeps telling me. But there's also some things that we can say about our stuff and what this passage is teaching us. And 3 points that I want to move through very quickly. One is that our treasures, our stuff, tells our destination. In the passage, it's telling us that don't store up treasures that what moth and rust can destroy. But store up your treasures in heaven. The treasures we have tell the destination that we are going to. So I want to ask, what do you treasure? And what does that say about where you are headed? Treasures tell our destination. The second thing that treasures tell us is our time frame. If you decide that you want to go out and buy a big pen, it is only cents. You can go to the dollar store, buy a pack of 12 pens or pencils for $1. But oftentimes I know that when I pull out those pens, 2 or 3 of them don't work. And the pencils are not always straight. And maybe the lead in them is a little bit weak and will snap out or fall out. And our stuff tells us what kind of perspective we have on our time. One of the ways we know that is if we keep collecting so many things for this lifetime, it's saying that we're investing to stay here. And that has been one of the most convicting lessons that I've been working through every time we move. I don't know how, but I keep repeating that lesson. As a pastor, typical pastor moves from church to church every 2.5 to 4 years. It's a pretty transient lifestyle. And my average has been, so far, pretty close to that. I had to think about why God moves me around so much. And I came to this conclusion, is that I didn't grow up in the Korean church. And so 6 churches plus 1 Chinese church, what have I learned? I've learned a lot more about Korean churches and Asian churches. And over the years, God was trying to move me. But you know what was always holding me back from the destination that God wanted me to bring me to? Was my stuff. We made it there. We got rid of a lot of stuff over the years. But we're still hauling stuff around. And our stuff tells the time frame that we are living for. Well, the third thing is that our treasures tell us our priorities. I want to ask something. People in this audience, just another simple poll, do you collect things? Do you collect things? I know I do. I have some collections. And actually, as a pastor, you know my biggest excuse is that I collect books. But you know what? Our treasures tell us what our priorities are. And what you collect says, that's very precious or important to you. Well, in essence, though, what is the heart of Jesus' teaching here? Is to what? Stop hoarding. Stop hoarding. Very simple. And you might say, but Pastor Eric, I'm really not a hoarder. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's look at hoarders. If you know about this on cable TV, I heard about this because I never actually got to watch the show until later. There's this show called Hoarders. It is all about people that just can't stop collecting things. And they're probably way far extreme case. You say, Pastor Eric, but I'm not like one of those. But you know what? Let's take a look at this. Here's a couple. This is where they live. This is their living room. And they literally have so much stuff. You can see there's plants around. You can see all these other things. And there's barely any room to do anything. Many of these people that hoard things, there's barely a pathway to get through. In fact, this woman that actually helps to narrate the show, she's trying to walk through one of these rooms, and her feet don't even touch the floor. That's how much stuff they have. Now, I didn't want to post these other pictures up there that are really gross, but some of them, a lot of the hoarders, they're more cluttered. And one person was a newspaper collector, and they had piles and piles of newspapers. Another just had papers and files. But others just hoarded. It wasn't even a hoarding. They were just too lazy to throw away food. So there were frying pans with food still in it. And of course, what comes when you have food out? Two things that I always know of. Cockroaches and rats. And so a lot of these houses that hoarders in, some of them have to be condemned. They literally have to throw away the house. The city comes and tells them, you can't live here. It is not sanitary, it is not safe, and the city will make it illegal for you to live in your own home because you have not just too much stuff, because it's so unsafe and unclean. Here's a little picture If you happen to notice, there's a biker or maybe it's a video game, I don't know, on that screen. But you can see all these milk bottles, milk jugs, and I don't know why. Somehow these children have to live in that kind of environment where their parents are hoarders. Now, like I said, you might say, well, Pastor Eric, I'm not a hoarder. But I want to ask you this. Maybe you're not a hoarder, and maybe you're not even an excessive collector. But here's the question. What are you accumulating in life? At the end of your life, all the stuff that you have, what are you accumulating? I had a friend that preached a sermon. He was talking about Koreans and Korean lifestyle. And I want to ask you this. How many of us have refrigerators and freezers that are full and we throw away food? Maybe it's leftovers? Sure. Or stuff that's just expired. Why? Around the turn of last century, back in just after the 1900s, people in the United States had gone through World War I, and they had gone through World War II, and they entered a period called the what? Great Depression. And money became so scarce to earn it, and people didn't trust banks because they were failing so much. So what did they do? They literally took the money and they hid it in their mattress. This thing that the scriptures is talking about of storing up treasures, there were no banks in many of these places. And raiders could come. And so what would they do? They would dig holes in their houses and bury their treasure inside there, literally. And other times they would build their walls and they would throw their money into the walls. Why? To hide it. And so when raiders would come, what would they do? They would literally turn the house upside down, digging up the floor, all the dirt, and they would smash down the walls and poke holes in it to find the treasure because they knew it was there. The other thing we know is that a lot of times clothes were very precious, and you wouldn't just throw them away like we do today. You would actually hand them down to people. And so the idea that a moth could come in and those worms could eat your clothes was very bad because clothes were very expensive and you literally handed them down to your children. That was normal. And people were so worried about keeping their clothes that they would store those things and bury them too. My question is, what do we keep back from God? What do we have that we hold so tight that we want more than Him? So you know what? I think if we look in our hearts, we find things that we hoard. Things that we want to keep. Things that we treasure. Things that we don't want to let go. So stop hoarding and choose what you invest in a way that's strategic. Well, our second portion of the passage says, the eye and the lamp is the body, so if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light is in you, if then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? This passage is very challenging to try and interpret. Every scholar I've run across ends up writing a really long section on these verses compared to the verses that are surrounding it. And I believe this is the very center of this passage and very central for us to understand what this is about. So if you remember this metaphor of eye and lamp and body and light, I want to share just a few key thoughts that I think will help encapsulate these things. First is that a good eye in this passage, how it's set up, is evidence of inner light. That there is light inside the body. Now, back in the old days, they had different theories about how the eye worked. Some of the theories even said that there's a little fire or lamp that works inside of your eyes. So kind of like your eyes are like headlights or flashlights. Now, Jesus isn't trying to give us a biology lesson here. And we now understand about rods and cones and rhodopsin and all these things, and the fovea centralis, the optic nerve. But what Jesus is speaking about is a metaphor. It's the fact that there has to be some sort of inner truth or inner goodness that's in there. And how we see the world is very conditioned by what's in our heart. Now, have you ever met somebody that's grumpy? Somebody that's always looking at negative things, right? And they're just a grumpy cat. And everything's so terrible. You know, Peanuts had a comic strip character. His name was Pigpen. And everything was always dark and gloomy and dusty and dirty. And everywhere he walked, there was this cloud around him. And some people are just like that, right? Is it because the world is as bad as people say it is? No. It's because what's in Pigpen's heart. So, a good eye is evidence of inner light or truth or goodness. The second thought that we need to keep in mind is that how we see money tells the health of our soul. There's an idea here that the way we look at, the way we treat money, says something about our own self. Our attitudes, yes. Our thoughts. But even more importantly, it says a lot about our own heart, right? The third thing is that nothing is mundane. This passage treats treasure not as don't have treasure. No. It's saying what? Don't store it up. Don't hoard it. Don't idolize it. And nothing is mundane because it all belongs to God and it's all made to glorify Him. Everything we have belongs to Him. He's just happening to let us borrow it. Have you ever had someone borrow something from you and then they never returned it? We've all had that happen, right? And yet, a lot of us live our lives with the things that we have, thinking we own them. Maybe for this lifetime we do. They're not ours. It all belongs to Him. And everything in creation, everything was made good. Everything was made to glorify God. And maybe God might be a little bit upset that some of the things that you have, you're not using to glorify Him. Well, we need to connect these pieces together. And I'm going to do this in one statement here. The singular purpose of generosity requires a grasp of the gospel. In other words, if we want to have this very large and consuming vision of what it means to be generous in our lives, we have to understand the gospel. The gospel is a vital part of this whole passage, not just about money and wealth and stuff, but also at the very heart and the very center of what we're talking about, the eye and all of these things that go in the lamp. Here lies the purpose of wealth. Money was made for generous giving to demonstrate the gospel and glorify God. I want to ask, when's the last time you gave something generously? Like, oh, no, here, have some more. One of the great examples I know is when I go to somebody's house and they pull out fruit and they put out some drinks. And I'm, oh, no, have some more. I'm like, oh, no, it's okay. I've been shown too much generosity. But when people play a host like that, and they open their home, and they share generously, as a pastor, it makes me so proud that these folks are showing the same kind of generosity as the gospel. We sing a song, how lavish your grace, how extravagant your love. The gospel, isn't it? And all these things that we have are made to glorify Him. So let me paraphrase the verses this way. It's not a direct paraphrase, but sort of a summary also. It says, if I see money in the light of the gospel, it lets others to see the gospel too. But if I see money and its purpose apart from the gospel, my heart will have great darkness. Every other definition of giving falls short of the standard that the gospel gives. One example of how we might understand this in a metaphor in our times a little bit better. They didn't have glasses back then. And so we go, and many of us in this room either have glasses or contacts, and we have these lenses that distort the light in particular ways. And we go to a good eye doctor in order to get the correct prescription, right? So that they will properly distort it so everything is clear. And one of the things that I will say is that very fascinating is when somebody is poor and they become rich, oftentimes you see this distortion of all of their priorities, all of their perspectives, all these other things in their lives. It's because of the lens of how they see. And those lenses are how they see money. Well, our passage is here, but I just want to talk about three things regarding the self. We talked about stuff, we're going to talk about self, we're going to talk about our sovereign. About ourself. How does stuff relate to self? Well, our treasures show how we see life. Our treasures show how we see life. It's because of our perspective. What do we value, and all these kinds of things, and what we think about all the time. And by the way, kids, that comes to you guys too. If all you can think is about video games, some of us might think about fashion and clothes, or houses, or cars, or whatever you want to say. It shows our perspective of how we see life. Our treasures also show our colors. This is playing off that vision metaphor of light and sight. But it shows what's really in our heart, right? And even more deeply, it shows who we will be in our character. The most striking example that I have here is that verse in John 10:10. It says, "The thief comes not but to kill, steal, kill, and destroy." And one of the most dangerous places to be is between a thief and the thing he wants to thieve. The stealer and what he wants to steal. Because if he is so dedicated to that goal, that object, that nothing will stand in its way. And so therefore, a person who comes to steal will kill and utterly destroy anything to get to that thing from here to there. If we've ever had our house broken into, even if you never saw the thief, it's very, very disturbing, isn't it? And our treasures show how far we'll go to get what we want. So my question is, what are we treasuring? And what kind of people will we be? So, and in the end, our call, and a positive call, is to what? Be generous. And you have to choose who you will be very carefully. Every single thing we buy, very important. I remember when I was a college student, and my sister was also in college, in a different college, and my father happened to buy her a car. It was a nice car. But at that time, I went with my sister, and we were standing in front of this car, and I asked her a question. Do you think we should pray and dedicate this car to God? And she looked at me and she said, sure. And we literally took a minute right there and said, God, please, thank you for this car. I pray that it will work really well. I pray that it will take her all the places she needs to go. And I pray that she would use it to be a blessing to everyone. And I think she put about 180,000 miles on that car. And back to that day, it was quite a long, that was a lot of miles. How we handle our stuff also affects who we will be. Our last verse here is, no one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. Jesus is bringing the passage all the way back around, clarifying it very simply to this thing: God or money. And I've expanded that to not just money, but stuff or things. But you could even put that with people, anything. So under the topic of sovereign, how do I show who is my sovereign? Who is my Lord? Who's in charge of me, the boss of me? Who owns me? And you know what? Treasures help define our decisions. What we choose as our treasure, what we value in life, impacts other decisions, doesn't it? Very early on, one of the things that many Koreans decide is, I want to make sure my kids go to the very best school. Right? So what do? They go on the internet, they search up all the school rankings, they search out all the school districts, and then they start comparing them all. And then they look at all the geographic areas that fit into that particular school or sets of schools or whatever it may be. We all know how to play that game. But because you decided to treasure your kids and their education, all of these other decisions then follow. Now, I'm not saying put your kids in poor schools. What I'm simply saying is this: because we make this one decision in here, this tail starts wagging this dog, and this tail starts wagging that dog, and this tail starts wagging another dog. And suddenly we have this cascade of decisions. And how you choose to view money is one of the most important and valuable decisions that will influence absolutely everything else in your life. Treasures also reinforce our loyalty. Do you understand? This is at the very heart of how a bribe works. When you give something, people naturally want to give back goodwill. So when a salesman comes, what are one of the things that they want to do? They want to give you something to make you feel like, oh, well, thank you. So that you'll listen to them. So that you might buy what they're going to sell. A politician understands. Even if it's technically not a bribe, they understand the power of a gift. And why? Because it moves our heart in what? Loyalty. And if you decide you want people around you to be loyal, guess what? You're going to need to do this. Understand how to give. third point is that treasures reinforce our worship. When we take what we treasure and we offer it, isn't that a stronger form of worship than just saying, God, I love you? And I want to ask you this today. When you came into worship today, did you come to give up something valuable? When you came in this door, did you come and you said, you know what, God, I want to give you something today. And I want it to mean something. And I want it to be valuable because I love you. Because you're the most important thing in my life. That's worship. We're a young church. There's a certain extent as a young church, we have to roll up our sleeves and we need to help. But one of the early signs that a young church or a growing church or a church plant is dying is when people don't want to give anymore. Oh, it's too much work. Oh, it's too hard. I see this of young pastors. Moksheim is asking me to do so much. I think one of the challenging things that I've seen, and by the way, those pastors, the young pastors that don't learn these lessons, you know what? They become pretty rotten pastors. When I say rotten, I really mean it. Doing all sorts of things that are just terrible. Same goes for older pastors too. If at one level we have not decided when we come to worship that I've come to worship the Christ who died for me, that in some part I ought to give my life and die for him. And is it really worship? I told that joke story many times. All the animals on the farm were so thankful for Farmer Brown. So, you know, he takes care of us. He takes us out to the pasture. He feeds us when we're sick. He helps us get better again. He helps us with our babies. And so the chicken, the cows, and the pigs all got together. And they decided, what are we going to do for Farmer Brown? Now, how does the story go? Well, the chicken says, you know, I love Farmer Brown so much, I'll bring some of my eggs. And the cow came by and said, yeah, you know, I'll give some of my milk. And then they looked at the pig. And the joke is the pig knows what sacrifice means. Doesn't matter how you cut ham, bacon, pork, sausage. And you might say, gosh, God, it's not fair. I'm the pig. Why can't I be the cow? What about the chickens? When we talk about sovereignty, we ask the question, are you here to serve God? Serve him. And choose him completely as your master. We talk about stuff. We talk about self. But ultimately it comes down to this question with money. Who's in control? Who has the power? You say, no, God. Or you don't lay it all out. So I want to share one more illustration to tie these things together and round us out for the day. You guys recognize this person? I hope so. He's the fastest man alive. In fact, he still is. He's the world record holder for sprinting 100 and 200 meters. Usain Bolt. He's known after every race, he makes sort sort of a bow lightning symbol like this. Right? And he's doing what he so famously has done all of his career. Every time he finishes, before he hits the finish line, he turns and smiles for the cameras. So this is what he's doing. And all the experts say that if he did not do this one thing, he could be even a little faster. But he knows he's still going to win. And he knows he still holds the record. And he knows probably nobody will beat him for a while. And he loves running. And he loves the publicity and all these things. But you know, our passage also talked about money and mammon. Is mammon right? But also in terms of God. And it would be very out of place if we took this guy. Now, if you guys know this person, I'd be very impressed. Kipchoge is Kenyan, and he's the world record holder for the marathon. He's run a marathon in 2 hours and 1 minute and some seconds. That's crazy. He is going like 13 miles an hour at running pace. And when he crosses the finish line, he smiles like this. And all his competitors are like, and he loves running so much, he loves to train and he loves to run. And when he comes to the competition, the whole way through, he's smiling like this. I want to ask you something. Would you put Kipchoge against Usain Bolt? And what's the statement that you should say next? Well, that depends. Which race is it? Is it a marathon? Or is it a sprint? And if you really want to make it interesting, you could ask, what about something in the middle? But I want to ask you this question. Are we running a sprint in our Christian lives? Or are we running a marathon? Are we packing and training? You know, if you put Kipchoge next to Usain Bolt, you know what you're going to notice? Usain Bolt looks really muscular. Kipchoge, he looks like a beanpole. They trained and they made all these decisions and they worked out, and they cannot do each other's races. Kipchoge cannot run in a sprint, and Usain Bolt has never run more than 200 meters in his life. That is the truth. He said so. I want to ask you this regarding our stuff. What does our stuff say? What kind of race are we built for? What kind of game are we playing? Here's my summary thought. We'll get to our main point one more time. Everything about what we do with things says something about our understanding of our salvation and our Savior. And we can use everything for Him. Everything. Anything and everything that's good, God can use it. So here's our main point. Money was made to show the gospel. God's love. And point to Him. So give generously. Let's pray. Father, we have more to offer than just our monies, but that is an important and powerful way to give, because money is so versatile and useful in many ways. So Father, maybe it's just our time, maybe it's just our care and attention and our love, but maybe something more in between. Lord, you have blessed us, and you might say, but Lord, I'm not that rich. We've been so blessed with everything that you've been giving. And maybe you think, oh, God, but I have a lot of stuff. Well, maybe there's some more that some of us have. But help us to realize it's not about the other person. It's about who you are and what I can do, what we can do to worship you. We pray all these things.